Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Welcome again. This is the second lecture of the 2025 MS CDP Conversations with Practitioners series. So as you know, but more stating it for the recording, this series features diverse practitioners from across computational design practice, offering a range of perspectives on design, technology, and architecture. This is our third year with this series. We started last week with Jose Sanchez. Today we will have Yehwan, who I will introduce more formally in a moment. And for each Tuesday through the remainder of July, we will have 3 more speakers. Trevor Scholes next week, Morikana, the practice consisting of Thierry Kananurik and Sebastian Morales-Prado, and then finally Francis Sang on July 29th. Now for Yehwan. Today's speaker, Yehwan Song, is a Korean-born web artist who specializes in the creation of anti-user-friendly, non-user-centric, unconventional, and diverse independent websites. Her work, spanning virtual spaces, physical installations, web tools, and user interfaces, satirizes and critiques the overgeneralization of users and the prevalence of templated websites. The primary focus of Song's artistic endeavors lies in exploring the discomfort and insecurity experienced by marginalized users hidden beneath the facade of technological utopianism, extensive comfort, speed, and ease of use. Her practice attempts to address digital discomfort stemming from a lack of consideration for diversity and a dearth of empathy. Through the act of exposing this discomfort and crafting non-generic web interfaces, Song aims to shed light on the inequalities pervasive within the digital environment. So I'll turn it over to Yehwan now. But first, just want to remind everyone that we'll have time for some questions afterwards, so make sure to prepare your questions in advance. And then as usual, I'll walk around with a couple of mics if you can just raise your hand. Okay. Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, first of all. My name is Yehwan Song. I am an artist, designer, developer from Korea and based in New York City. My work is very much about like internet, web. I develop and design the website, and I make like an experimental website. But also I make some sort of like performance of users using the device and the website, and also like do a lot of like installations as well too. So like since I have like a lot of different practices, I've been like thinking about, what should I share for this talk? But since we have like enough time, I kind of feel like I'm just gonna share the entire thing from the very beginning of my practice until now. There was like a COVID, AI got more like accessible these days, and also like technology has been changed a lot. Since the technology has changed, my practice has changed a lot as well too. So like I'm gonna cover the entire thing, but some of them might feel like a little like old, and some of them feels a little like a new stuff. But yeah, I think we have like enough time to share those. But for today, I wanna start the talk with this quote from Cedric Price saying, "Technology is the answer." Then what was the question? I first saw this quote when I was like only like few years ago, like 7-8 years ago, and I was like working as a UX UI designer in a large company. And when I first saw this quote, I was like asking like, what was the question really? What I used to do at that time was like making like a UX UI design, like repeating the same template and following the templates. There was like a very strong law that I need to follow as, designer, in-house designer in a company. And I was told that if I change the template or change the layout, that eventually confuse the user, and that is like a wrong design, that is not a good design. And following the same template and make it straightforward, easy to use, and fast is the way of like making a user-friendly design. And I feel like very frustrated learning that, when it comes to like UX UI or web design field, there is like a huge limitation, and like experiments considered as like a wrong design. And I was like asking questions like, where is the diversity? Why shouldn't user get confused when they enter the website that they first entered? Isn't it very natural for the users to get confused and learn about like software and the program, like a system and the layouts when they first enter the websites? And by learning that, they learn the content structure and etc. So I feel like thinking a lot about like that sort of question at that time, and I started the practice called anti-user friendly, which is not really about like I'm gonna have a fight with the users, but it's more about like what if I think about the web design or make an experimental web design that is not following the traditional user-friendly design structure, that is not following like static templates. So it was like a very beginning of me trying this anti-user friendly practice. And I made this website that you need to touch 4 fingers on the top of the screen, and then the content shows below the finger, so you need to like rotate the device to see the content. So in order to like read the content of the website, you need to like rotate the device and see the secret behind it. And the content of the website was about like a secret, whatever, that sort of stuff. But I started to feel like this is very interesting if you think about what the device can do. Like device can detect like multiple different finger touches, and there are so many gestures that we can play with these devices. It was in the middle of the COVID, and I was like, I just want to go out and take a walk. So I ended up making this website that I can walk in home. And like I'm trying to like intentionally break the traditional like law of like user-friendly or responsive design, which is like a website that actively distort the image when I change the screen ratio. This is another example of that you can only read the content when the website is a specific ratio. Like, I think I was like thinking that making this sort of website is sort of like a performance of me suggesting different, or like suggesting we need to think more than like following the traditional UX UI design, which we don't really know why we have this, or we as a designer, I think it's a responsibility to think about making a website that is not for the company, but also for the users. And that is not for the company to advertise their content and make users eventually exposed to the content that they didn't want to see, but think about what kind of like UX UI design that we can think of for make the users to find the content make the users to actively find the content that they want to see. This is another one that I did during the COVID as well too. I was like collaborating with one of the friends who was in Canada and I was in Korea during the COVID, and we made this website that once I touch the screen, that this kind of like a virtual finger shows up to the another screen so that we can touch each other's fingers remotely. And it was like very depressing moment during the COVID, and we were like so emotional that we were touching each other from Korea to Canada. It was a COVID thing though. This is called Don't Touch the Touch Screen. And I was like fascinated with the fact that, it's like a small cell phone device, but there's a camera, there's multiple different sensors that we can play with. For this one, I was using hand detector and camera, so then like hand gets closer. When hand gets closer, then the face goes away. And I also learned that in an emergency situation, when you are not able to use your hand, you can touch the touch screen with your tongue or lips. So then you can, call 911. So I kind of felt like I can play with that actually. So I made this one that is like a website and React with like general touch when there's like a touch input. And then I was touching the device with my lips. I'm not gonna share more of this, but I've been like really fascinated about like body tracking or gesture tracking and the website interacting with it. I was like very interested in, I always think of like when I make a website, when I like make an experimental website, I kind of like think a lot about not only the website itself, but more about how the user use the website or the environment the user enter the website. And I'm kind of like very interested in what kind of gesture that we can do in front of the web camera or the device when you're using the device. So I feel like doing a lot of like experiment with the gesture and the website, and this is one of that whenever I do like this crying gesture, then this like cry pop-up, cry don't cry pop-up shows up. And at that time, it was also during the COVID, and I was like very interested in how like internet intentionally limits the emotions that we are expressing. So like it always like shows like a shiny, fancy happiness instead of like all the variety emotions, feelings that we have. So I'm trying to like talk about like emotional aspects as well too. This one I use like microphone, and it's kind of like interacting with the microphone. Another walking with the desktop. And then I've been like, I was like always very interested in how these devices are pretty naive. Like it always think of when there's like a conductive touch, then it detects it as a touch point, like human finger touch. But like whenever it touches the conductive material, touches the touch screen, it reacts. So I kind of feel like, I can play with the conductive material and make a website that react with the touch input. So I made this website because the water itself is the conductive material. When I pour the water on the top of the touch screen, it detects as a touch point. And I made this website that make like this white dot whenever the water touches the touch screen. And then on the right bottom side, I made this like a 3D program that stacks the sort of like a water shape whenever there's a touch input. And y-axis is like a time, so it's kind of like as time goes, it stacks the material, stacks like this water shape. This is another, using like same strategy, but I was like playing with the water gun. I was like just having so much fun. Because it's like a boundary. We learned that we need to avoid device from the water, even though they advertise it as like, this is like a waterproof device. So I kind of like love like playing with this like boundary that we are trained not to do when we are using the device and intentionally shooting the water. So I had so much fun, so I ended up making fountain. This fountain stuff. It was, I did like solo show earlier this year at the place called Pioneer Works in New York City, and it was part of that show. And the show runs for 4 months, and then the fountain was on during the entire show, and the phones are still working. And I was like, oh, this is like, Apple device is really waterproof. I think they need to sponsor me at one point. Yeah, so there was like a fountain. This is called Mountain Everest scroll bar, because the scroll bar looks like a Mountain Everest. I was like trying to like have fun, like having a good time with me experimenting with the website and devices. This is like a website that you can read the content when the scroll bar is in the specific position. And I was like also interested in, also it was during the COVID and everyone was trying to make like a 3D metaverse website, and I was like interested in making like a real 3D website, because I think it's boring making a 3D website and presenting it through the flat screen. So I'm trying to make some sort of like a real 3D, website. So I ended up like aligning a few different mobile devices and make it like a sculpture. And then the website underneath these devices are like 3 different websites, but they are communicating each other in person, in time, like in a real time. So like eventually it becomes like a one huge website that is presenting as like a 3D sculpture. And I've been like super interested in that. I'm not gonna share more, but I've been like super interested in how can I present the web in a physical space. And I kind of like I have like a lot of trial to break this flat screen and present the website, sort of like mingle it in a physical space. This is called Aquarium. It feels like really, like when you're seeing this and interacting with this website, it really feels like you're touching the water, because the screen itself is really like, it has like a water sort of like temperature and stuff. yeah, like similar. And also, like, if you think about the mobile device, you can rotate it, you can put it from like put it on the ceiling or on the table, etc. So I was kind of like interested in sort of like all the like angles that you can see the mobile device and how does that change the user's gesture and posture. So for this one, it's really hard to tell, but there's like a little conductive tape that is attached on the paper. And then I'm like touching the tape on the screen and rotating it and eventually rotate the image inside the website. I was also interested in the fact that when we are using like a Google Map or Web Map, there is like a marker that whenever you change the zoom setting, then the distance of the marker changes, but the size of the marker remains the same. So I was like interested in doing that. At that time, Google had this feature that you can change the shape of the marker. So I ended up making this like clouds and like rainbows, and whenever you zoom in, the distance of the clouds gets larger and you can see the rainbow behind. So rainbow behind the clouds. Again, I was super into like playing with the conductive material. And also I kind of like, since I also have like a design background, I love like playing with the typefaces, typography, and playing with this like readable, unreadable stage change. So I made this sort of like interactive website and also this like little conductive stick. When you touch the stick on the top of the screen, then the letters gets readable because half of the letter shows underneath the screen. And like if you look closer to this like little object, there is like a little 2 dots underneath this object, and the distance of the dots are different. That's how this, the device detects the different blocks. Clips. Yeah, clips. I guess I think for this, especially while I'm like experimenting this one, it really helped me to think about, not only the website underneath the screen, but the environment around the website, because eventually, since it detects with the clip, we see like the entire environment, including the clip, instead of like looking just the screen. And I think I was like also like experimenting with this, but also making like more like a website as well too. But it will help me to think about when I'm making a website, not only seeing the layout inside the screen, but also considering the environment or when user uses the website. I was also playing with this little joystick that you use when you are playing games. And I was like, I want to play with that. Another conductive stuff, this is called sorter, and when you touch this little conductive thing on the top of the screen, then it sorts the icons based on the color. And also like different body parts to interact with the website. Yeah. Also play with the AR marker and the gesture and how the AR the website, you are seeing the website screen and website detects the AR marker, different AR markers, and each has like a different frame of the one animation, so it shows the animation as I'm rotating my arm. This is another website that I made with the AR marker. So if you enter the website, it's like a website with a bunch of like different like blocks that has a scroll bar, but if you see it through the camera, then you can see different AR yellow stones in this website. And like the concept of that one eventually is like eventually the website become unreadable because of these like shiny yellow stones. This is like a side view. And also I love like this complicated weaving stuff. So I made this website that you can scroll and weave and eventually see the image underneath it. As I roughly shared before, I was super interested in like all the different gestures and sort of like combining some emotional aspect and the gesture and the website and pop-up boxes and text, all that kind of stuff. And I've been like experimenting a lot with that. I'm just gonna share some of those. This one, obviously, the website is detecting the nose position, and then when you're rotating the face, it shows the content. And like, I eventually do a lot of like performance, real-time performance with the website, either through Zoom or in person. But you know, like, and sort of like experimented with the entire body movement. Yeah, just have done like a lot of different sketches. And some of them I eventually use that for like part of, like they go inside like a larger installation as a production mapping, or they individually exist as like an individual artwork, or I just sketch them and not using them eventually. But just I was like super into this practice, and what I did was like literally like making like a very basic code that opens a pop-up when, you know, when fingertip touches the eyes, or fingertip touches like, or the nose rotate from the center, and then sort of like doing all different kind of like gesturing from the web camera to see what works well and what doesn't work. And you know, and then sort of like based on that gesture, I think about like what kind of like content that I can include, and then eventually made a like a performative website. And I think that's interesting that like user's gesture is connected to the content, and I think that's very different from the traditional UX UI design where the users are trained to repeat the same gesture, and then the contents, even though the contents are different, users are repeating the same gesture. So like here, like user do like specific gesture, and then the contents follows the gesture, and I think that's like interesting difference between what I used to do as a traditional UX UI design and what I am doing here. And those are like one big pile of like anti-user friendly practice that I've been like trying to think about how the user use the device, and how can I change that gesture, and how can I change this like traditional user friendly design strategy. And also I've been like trying to think about the website itself, not only the gesture or the like interactive aspect of the website, but also the website inside the screen. For this, I have like a video recording of each of the website, but since they are the websites, I kind of like love showing the website itself. Ta-da! Yes. So I've been like making a website that is not following the traditional like web design templates, but I kind of like wanted to make a website that shows the content structure itself. So the website is actively changing when the contents are different. And as users are exploring the website, get confused and get lost in the website, they understand the website and also the content structure as well too, because the website itself is representing the content structure. And each of them has like an architectural shape, so that's why I call it as a narrative architecture. And this is like my website that includes all the different websites that I made. So each of those architectural shapes are the website. For example, this is the website that I made for Istanbul Biennial. So like for this website, I kind of like wanted to, the theme of that biennial is about like archiving and compost. So I wanted to make a website that archive itself, and as user add the new content, the layers are being added. So all these like layers of this website are the content. Each of the, whenever user add the page or the content, and then the layers are being added on this website. So there is like a little calendar. You can see like very beginning of this website where there's only like 2 layers, but as time goes, you can see that the layers are being added. Since I'm adding on new contents while I'm like making this website, and you can click it and go to like, each of those contents are linked to the external page. So yeah, you can see like the contents, the website is growing and getting aged as I'm adding new content in this website. What was that? Let's see. This is another website that I made for the exhibition, and it's kind of like for this website, I wanted to start with this sort of like a diagram like shape. On the top view, you can see like all the diagrams, which each of those circles represent the artist, and the central point where all the bubbles are overlapping is the place where the exhibition is happening. So you can kind of like rotate this diagram and zoom in to the central point where you can see the contents. Let's see. This is the website for the museum. They wanted to make a website that is like archiving all the content, all the like exhibition that they've been showcasing in the museum. But at the same time, they want to talk about sort of like behind the story of their exhibitions and curations. So I made this front page where you can scroll and click one of them, scroll and see the content. But also at the same time, you can sort of like rotate the page, and there's like a behind story of this curation and the archive, which you can also click and read the content. There's a little sitemap. This is like when I'm like developing this website, this page was so satisfying, and I'm like, to my clients, it's like, you need to rotate this. They are not that much interested in. This is a website that uses like a huge cylinder to show like a content structure. This is also the page that archive all the sort of like a student output, which is like a PDF form. So you can, the roundest side represent the year, so that you can click one of those years, and then the slices side shows the preview of the PDF, and then you can click one of them and download the PDF from the website, which I'm not gonna do that right now. But for this website, I use like web map code for the navigation, so that like you are literally like dragging the slices side as if you're navigating the web map. What else? This is a website that I made for the museum called X Museum. And obviously the website shows like an X shape. And depending on the direction that the cubes are coming from, they are, it represents the category of the content. So you can see, yeah, like when the cubes are coming from the right top to the center, then it means that the cubes are in the category of events, etc. And you can click them, read the contents. you can see like I always trying to make like part of it sort of follows the traditional template, and there is like some part that is not, that is like surprising moments, because like many of these are, I work with clients and I need to convince them that user can at least see the information through the website. This is another website that I made for the like architecture, summer school kind of stuff. So you can enter the website and you can click one of those. You know, it's kind of like working as like a traditional website. But if you drag the page, then you can see like a hidden 3D side of this website. Because it's like an architecture summer school, so I think like, you know, we need to have like an architecture aspect of this website. And since I was like using 3D Cube for this website, I ended up having like 3 different faces that I can play with. So I ended up having the English content on the front page. The Korean content is on the right side of the cube. And then on the top, you can see the poster of the event. What else? Yeah, this is the website that I was working with, organization named Rhizome in New Museum. And the concept of this website is that we want to make a website that is, even though me and my friend enter the website using the same URL, we see the slightly different website. So this is like those like little cells or the cubes are generated by the random number. So whenever user enter the website, it's kind of like generate the shape through the random number. So users ended up seeing slightly different website whenever they enter the website. And it's, as you can see, it's kind of like, as I'm navigating the website, it's sort of like rearrange each shapes. And you know, there's a little user-friendly aspect of this website. You can click the menu button, and then from there you can see the content as if you are navigating the, you know, traditional website. And then you can mix it again. What else? I've been making a lot of different websites. Oh, this is the worst. This is like least functioning website that I made. This is a website that is like on the left side of this page. You can scroll the page and then you can click one of them and read the content. But at the same time, the website is capturing itself and archiving its image on the right side. Because it's about like, it's for the exhibition that is capturing the recent moment of the graphic design and art, contemporary art in South Korea. So I wanted to make a website that is archiving itself as well too. So, you know, like, as you can see, like as I'm navigating on the left side of the website, it captures the different image and archive it on the right side. I'm just gonna close it because it scares me. And another website that it's like a huge hallway, and as you are scrolling inside, it's sort of like mixing the content. And also some user-friendly moments of where you can see the content. What else? I was gonna click this. This is the website for, let me see, yeah. I'm very scared of like, as I'm going into like each of those websites, I'm not really sure if this is still working or not. So I'm like very scared of like clicking each of the buttons. But this is the website that I made for the, like, part of like a Venice Biennial in South Korea. Korean Pavilion, I made this website that has this concept of like a virtual classroom. So like I ended up making this 3D space, but let me just refresh this page. 3D space, but the like fun aspect of this website is like it's using the Google spreadsheet as a database. So on the right side, that's like you know, the Google spreadsheet here. And it's kind of like using the Google spreadsheet as a database, and whenever you change the content in the Google spreadsheet, then the like shape of the 3D space or the website changes as well too. And that was like a concept of like a classroom, because like when we are imagining the classroom, all the students are like decorating and shaping the classroom, like interior of the classroom as well too. So I kind of like wanted to make a website that anyone can come into the Google spreadsheet and change the database and change the shape of the classroom or the website. So I kind of like think of it as like a collective web environment that anyone can come and change and reconstruct the 3D space. So there's no like a one huge owner of the website who's like building the entire space, but like everyone can come, join, and collectively build the space. So that was that of like whole series of the narrative architecture website. I have a lot more, but I think I should not share all of them. But like few more videos that I want to share, because it's just so satisfying navigating each of this website through the mobile page, mobile view. And for this website, I was like when I'm like introducing, like sharing the concept of the website to my clients, I shared this video, and then my client was like, "What are you, like, what do you mean?" Like, and then I ended up making this website. So I was like, I met a lot of like generous clients, and for this website, this is the Google spreadsheet page that anyone can come and edit. Which I found it really interested that like anyone can come in and change the Google spreadsheet and eventually change the website, which I ended up making like a bunch of different workshops with this structure, which I call it like a collective web. And I'm doing like several different workshops that inviting like 30 to 40 students, and then let them to come inside the website, the Google spreadsheet, and let them to like actively, collectively change and shape the Google spreadsheet. And then, so this is like going through all the like history of the Google spreadsheet, how this like group of students change the Google spreadsheet, play with the Google spreadsheet. And then, you know, there are lots of like spreadsheets that students collectively built. And I made a website that is using Google spreadsheet as a database and converted into like a 3D space. So this is like a 3D space that students collectively built through the workshop. So like through this sort of like project, I kind of like wanted to talk about, you know, all this like, cause I like, as time goes, we are relying more on the platform, not like building individual like homepage or making our own website. And like we are kind of like giving our data to use in order to be like making our account in social media, etc. So I'm kind of like wanted to think about, you know, what if we can collectively build a website together as a user of the website? This is part result of another workshop. There's a little peak. Yeah, all these like different shapes built by the students. That was another pie of like narrative architecture and collective web sort of stuff. I have like a few different like bubbles or questions that I have, and my practice is very much about like trying to answer those questions. During the COVID and after the COVID, the social media, especially like TikTok and Instagram, got really popular worldwide. And I think it really depends on where you are coming from or where you are based in. But for me, I was like in between Korea and United States during the COVID and after that. And I kind of like experienced how the social media, like how those like a major social media got really big, and how the Korean individual independent social media platforms are being ignored as time goes. like if you look into the map, this is like a map of like how like each country, what kind of social media, social network that each country used to use. And you can see that as time goes, they only use like one platform, even though like in 2008, for example, each country have their own social network platform. And I kind of started to feel very, and also like living in the United States and learning code in United States was really different for me, like the experience of that was really different. As, I guess like I am not using English as a main language, but all the coding language is based on English, all the domain system is based on English, and all the accounts, as we are not using Korean social networks anymore, we need to change our name into like English to make an account. So we ended up like, Koreans ended up using like weird, username in social media, social networks. And I kind of started to feel like very frustrated how like internet is very English dominant, but we still call it as a World Wide Web, and we still think of it as like a place where we connect each other and communicate worldwide. So I kind of started to feel like, if you like look into like a research of how many people are connected to the internet, only like 65% of the world population is connected to the internet, but we still call it as a World Wide Web and consider the things that are coming out in the internet is like, the information coming from all around the world, and I think that's kind of like a part of like, colonialization, and I want to like talk about how the using internet experience is different coming from different country, and also obviously like internet in United States is very different from internet in China or Korea. The censorship is different, the platform is different. So I kind of like want to talk about those sort of like differences, and that eventually became like my main research for a while. So I did this project called Whose World, How Wide Web. For this one, I tried to actively talk about like Asian internet, and and how does that lose its individuality or independency as the major social media, and also as like AI got bigger, and which requires like a huge data set. So that was a point that I started to doing some sort of installation as well too. So I ended up making this like cardboard-based structure, which on the center you can see like huge Korean keyboards, because I was like interested in talking about like losing Korean language in the internet space, and like Koreans ended up forced to change their language into English to like free navigating the internet. And from here, and also like as you can see from narrative architecture or experiments, I was like interested in sort of like a 3D shape or architecture shape, architecture shape of the website. And I started to like have interested in, another bubble. I started to have interested in like all this like 3D shape of the website and like physicality of the website, and how can I convert the website into physical space. For example, this practice that I just shared, that touching the screen with the water, I made this website on the right bottom side that stacks this 3D shape whenever the water touched the touch screen. And then I eventually converted into like 3D object and then printed it out. And I started to have like a lot of like interest in like that like shape is, I sort of feel like this is not really entirely online or entirely offline. It's kind of like formed in between the two. And I have like I started to have like, thinking about this like not online, not offline, but this whole gray area, and started to think that online and offline is not a black and white, but there's like a huge gray area, and that's the right way of understanding online and offline space. So I was like trying to experiment this gray area in a different way of like making this like smaller structure through using a 3D printer. For this practice, I also like made the little printed out form for this website as well too. I made like a little 3D printout. Done. And then I started to make like an installation that sort of like showcasing. From that point, I started to use like a lot of like projection mapping and sort of made like a structure that showcasing a bunch of different pop-up windows, space through the different layers, and try to like break this like flat screen, and also place these like small mouses rotating between the pop-up boxes. Another page that it's really hard to tell, but those like little boxes that are showing on the top of this structure are the like different pop-up screens on the website. So that was like trying to think about this gray area. I started to expand my practice into more installation and projection mapping. So mapping, like showcasing the website in a physical space. And recently, I started to have like huge interest in when we are talking about the internet, we always use water as a metaphor, like web surfing, streaming service, cloud service, port system. All these like terms we always use, and we have like a submarine cable to activate the internet, make a network. So like all these terms are sort of like use water as a metaphor, and I think it's very interesting how people or early developers use the water to like make internet like imaginable through like this like invisible internet imaginable. So I want to talk about the internet, but I started to use still use the water as a metaphor to talk about the internet. And I started this practice called drowning surfers, which is like sort of like criticizing the surfers, the internet users who are not able to like surf and navigate actively, independently, but like following the algorithm and like seeing the content that the algorithm shows them. So I started this practice called drowning surfers. And that was, I started the project with this like a little performance of me as a web user drowning into the blue screen. And for this, I made a lot of like an installation. And you can see like all those like little clips that I shared are projected on the top of this installation, where the central area there's like users are drowning into the water. This is more like a top view, terrible resolution. Another installation. And the images that you are seeing are the website as well too. It's just not only because I feel comfortable using the website instead of rather than other software, but also it's sort of like important for me to like keep using the website and presenting it into the physical space. So even though it's not like, looks like a traditional website that you are used to, it can be a website in a 3D space. And the structures many of them are built by the cardboard, which I think is like I love this like assemblable units are like aligning with the internet, as assemblable aspect of the internet, and this like disposable like cheap material works well with our website. This is the project called Internet Barnacles. And also I kind of like want to make this like little boxes have the image of the surfers. So those surfers are not actively navigating or surfing the internet, but instead they are like sticking on the top of like a larger structure, like barnacles are the concept of this installation. And this is another view of barnacles. And this is the last slide that I want to share today. This is called Web Surfer, because the website is surfing. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Yehwan, for sharing like so much fantastic work. I have a couple mics here, so if people have questions, please raise your hand, and I'll come over and give you a mic. But first, maybe I have one quick question. You mentioned when you moved into kind of installation that you still try to think about like basically how you think about the web moving into kind of a physical space. Like, I don't know, can you just talk a bit more about that?
I guess like for the installation, like the initial thought that I had is that I wanna like bring the website in. I wanna break this flat screen and bring it into like a physical space, and user can kind of like walk around the website and exploring the website. And I think that's kind of like what is happening when we have like a device and we use the website every time whenever we are walking on the screen, walking on the street and etc. But this is more like a physical view of that. But like through like making this installation, I kind of like want to talk about this, the fact that we are always surrounded by the internet, and it is presented in a physical space, but we are always surrounded by the internet in a physical space, even without the installation. So that was like a initial point that I started the installation. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. That was incredibly fascinating and inspiring. Going off of the kind of live installation curiosity that Adam had, I'm curious also, you mentioned performance and kind of thinking about, because a lot of what you're curious about is kind of user interactivity, and I also noticed that a lot of your works have your own like perspective and kind of subjectivity in it. So I'm curious, like, how have you integrated performance, like either with yourself or users, or if you have projects where that was kind of a focal point?
Yeah, I like, it was initially started with me like interacting with the website in front of the web camera, and then I got like a lot of like suggestions that you can do like you should do like a live performance in front of the people, and that was a lot of like, cause like doing gesture in front of the web camera alone in your room is very different from being in front of a bunch of people, doing still the same thing in front of the web camera, but there is like a real people around me. So it was like a lot of experiments, and also I learned a lot through that process. But I eventually install the web camera as we have like over there, and then I do like a gesture. There's like a projected space where you can see the website, the pop-up boxes following my body. So that's how I figured out the live performance, and that make me think a lot about how personal when we are using the website or the device, and how does that feels very different when I share the screen with the others, real time in a physical space. So I'm still like learning a lot by doing like a performance too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. I love your work. I think it's so fascinating, and I love what you just said about that you learn a lot from the process. My question is like, where do you get your inspiration, and where's the starting point for your projects? Specifically like the water droplets on the iPad. If you could just talk a little bit more about how you get inspired and like, what the starting point is for you.
I guess like I've been like a huge fan of like 90s, 80s web art, net art movement. When the internet first got accessible, and there used to be a lot of like developers and designers or the artists making like a fun interactive web in 90s, 80s, and I feel like going through all the history of the internet and seeing all this like experimental website and found it very interesting. And that was like a starting point for me to make like a interactive, fun website. But I think that it also includes a lot of like experiments, especially this like water dropping things or conductive material. There are many different conductive material but some of them are working and some of them are not working. So there has been a lot of like trial, like experiments, and like I guess like 90% of them are not working eventually, and 10% is the ones that I shared today. So I guess like it's kind of like a combination of like a reference, inspiration coming from 90s net art, web art, and also like a lot of different experiments.
Thank you.
Hi, I love your work, especially the concept of user-friendly, especially when you have like a working background in UX industry, regarding to like the inspiration and working process when you're working like for clients for those websites. I wonder like what's the process of making those art? Like how do you balance the user-friendly and anti-user-friendly portion?
I guess like things got a lot more easier as I have like more portfolio. Like now, like clients who are looking for like a traditional website never comes to me for sure. Like they are expecting some sort of like experimental aspect of the website and they come to me. So they are generally very flexible or very generous in terms of like experimental aspect of it. But as I shared with the website, there are like always like there's like a little menu button that if you get lost, you can click the menu button and you can see the content. So there are a lot of like compensation with the client as well too. But I think, and also my clients are very much coming from cultural institutions like museums, or museums. So yeah, but it's kind of like, it is hard, sometimes it is easy, sometimes it really depends on the clients.
Thank you. Just jumping off of that, do you do any sort of user testing for the experimental or commercial websites?
It also depends on what kind of project that I have, but I guess it really depends on, like, Europe has like much more strict law in terms of like a website, including cookie policy and accessibility. So I need to include all the like alt text and all that to make the website legally like host the website. So for that sort of project, I go through the user testing or looking for the agency, and they go through the user testing and then give me some sort of like a feedback. So there are, some of the website includes that sort of process for sure.
Hi, I really love your work, and I've always I have two questions actually. So one, it'd be like, so you mentioned you did like UX UI design, and like, is there any like pop-up moment, like thoughts or specific moment to turn your career?
I think I was like used to work in like a huge car manufacturing company, and I was the one who's like making a navigation like that goes inside a car, and it was like so boring working in there, and that was huge inspiration for me that I wanna get out of this space. So yeah, I think that's the inspiration for me.
One more question. It'd be like, I'm also interested in like, so-called minority. Like, for example, I was into like anti-design movement, like from Italy, like back in design school, undergrad. But sometimes I felt like some people's like consider. Like somehow it's still, so it's also interesting, but somehow I feel like it's still minority, like framing. So how do you think like this kind of things like move into like closer to the community?
I guess like what I eventually want to achieve from, especially for that anti-user friendly or architecture website is that I think there should be a more diverse voices when it comes to UX UI design. I'm not saying that this direction is the correct direction to go, but it's more like, there should be this sort of website as well too. But there should be more like a traditional, easy to use website as well too. But there should be more diverse options. And I think I just wanted to put like one different voice in this field. And I still think that that's like designers' responsibility. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I was really intrigued by the themes of like touch and tactility and like physicality, especially in the earlier work that you showed. I guess I was just hoping you could speak a little bit more on like how you see like the body of the user in relation to like the screen or the website.
Yeah, I think especially at that time, I thought like it's very frustrated when especially at the time, like UX UI designers still think that the desktop website is the major and then the mobile website is the minor form, like smaller form of the desktop website. And they are so much fascinated in like keeping the same design layout in the mobile form and making it functioning, keeping the same design layout. Even though if you think about the user's environment when they're using the desktop website and also using the mobile website, the environment is very different. Users are using like a mobile device anywhere on the street, whereas when they're using the desktop, they are usually sit on the chair and navigating the website on the top of the desktop. So I kind of like felt like those sort of like strategies really limits the understanding of the website and understanding of the user, and I think that was the starting point for me to think about what is the difference between two different devices and what is the difference for the user side and what can I do if I think about that different and really activate that difference.
Is this okay? Thank you so much for your presentation. That was wonderful. I thought it was really interesting how you've taken a website and something that's virtual and then made it into almost like a physical space that the user is navigating. And I was curious if or how you have found inspiration in like how people navigate the built environment or the real physical environment.
I'm not sure if there's like one specific moment that I like felt like need to build the installation, but I kind of like I'm not sure if this is like answering your question, but again I wanted to like break this like flat screen, and I was like super tired of this like a mega screen installation. When it comes to like digital work installed in the physical space, they always ended up using this fancy mega screens surround the people with this like a projected screen. And I think that's so like repeating the same stereotype of the digital fancy device, and repeating the same template, all that kind of stuff. So I trying to like actively break that, and that's the reason why I ended up using like cheaper material like a cardboard and assembling the material, and then also like projecting, not using like a super high resolution projector, but more like a projection and thinking about like a physical structure of it. I'm not sure if that answers.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really inspiring. You're back here. Yeah. So a lot of the work that you presented seemed like it is about to break the barrier of the 2D interface, right? So I would really be interested in understanding your thoughts on like the future where the tangible and intangible meet, like a hybrid dimension through AR, XR, and stuff like that, and how the entire interaction design and UI UX can be redefined into understanding the internet through that space.
That's a great question. I don't really know. Like, I guess like since, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk, since the technology changes so fast, some of the work already looks very outdated as well too. And I, as like artist and a developer, I trying to like educate myself and think about the future as well too. But I also at the same time trying to think about not how to not follow the futuristic mindset as well too, if that makes sense. And many of the works also has that, you know, I'm not trying to follow the futuristic, you know, what is the future, but more like how can I, instead of like, when you're thinking about like technology, it's kind of like it's just following this like step by step, like you are reaching to some of that point that where you don't really know where we are going, but there is like you're always like trying to develop. But I kind of like want to change the shape into like more like a branch, like not really heading to like one point, but trying to think about like diverse direction. So I guess like I'm super interested in like all this like AI movement. I think it's really fascinating, but at the same time, I wanna like think of it instead of like developing a new thing, think of all the things that we already have as an ingredient and kind of like think about how can I combine it, make a new, something different, if that makes sense. Mm. Mm. I usually like work by myself. Like I install, those are the laser coated cardboard, and I just cut it, install it. All the process I'm trying to like do it by myself, just because I'm like, just like assembling it is really satisfying experience, and you know, like those like a 3D, 2D, or like manufacturing process, all those things are, I'm just like, I think that I am just having so much fun learning on new tools and jumping into a new space. So so far I feel like working by myself, not like collaborating with the others, even though I hire a lot of assistants to assemble it together. But yeah, so far I'm kind of like, all of these are made by myself.
So I have a question, but if anyone else has one after me, raise your hand, I'll get you a mic. But I'm just like, as a representative of someone who like designs very finicky websites and interfaces, and with the experience of someone who's designed very boring UX, UI interfaces before, on like the long historical march towards like the very standardized, boring website, like, do you feel like we're in a moment of kind of continuing down that trend, or are we in a little bit of a backlash to that right now? I don't know, do you have any thoughts around that?
That's a good question too. I think like, especially when I started the anti-user-friendly project, it was around like very beginning of the COVID, and I think the internet and the way people use the technology at that time is very different from at that time than now, since we are much more accessible after these AI and all these tools. And I think at that time it felt like a really anti from all this like user-friendly internet environment, whereas nowadays there are more diverse options and people are thinking a lot of different things. And I think, I don't know, I'm also like following the flow. I always say that my practice is very much about, I pick up one point in the mainstream and then complaining about it. That's my practice. And I'm kind of like, I think the anti-user friendly is not really a sort of a thing as it used to be than now. And I'm trying to like think about how, like seeing how the scenes changed and think about what I can do or what I can think, how can I think differently in this mainstream. So I don't even know.
Anyone else? Any more questions for Yehwan? A couple more, and then we can end after that.
Hi, I'm just really curious about some of the websites you made. They seem like web archives. Has that sparked any interest in archiving or information science at all?
I am so bad at archiving websites. Like this morning, I got this email from one of my clients that I worked together for 3 years ago, saying that the website is not working. And then I went back to like the code that I made 3 years ago to make it working. So like I always think that internet or the website is naturally really hard to archive. It's more like the water floating all the time instead of like one static form. And it requires a lot of like man-force to make it working, continuously working and archiving it. So I think that's like also like a huge question when it comes to like internet, experimental web, and etc. But I'm personally not really good at that.
Thanks so much, Yehwan.
Thank you.